in the Department of Planning and Development. Invest in Cook is a transportation grant program administered by the Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways. This Invest in Cook presentation, as well as the question and answer period, will last 1 hour or less. Beginning at 2 o'clock, the Department of Planning and Development will begin their presentation on the application process for the Community Development Block Grant Program. If you've joined this meeting through Teams, you should be able to see on your screen a chat button that will allow you to ask questions at any time while we are presenting. At the end of our presentation, we will answer those questions before the Department of Planning and Development's presentation begins at 2. At that time, you can also click the hand button so that we can unmute you if you'd like to ask a question that will be heard by the entire audience. Both presentations will also be posted to our respective websites for later viewing at your convenience, and will include questions asked and answers provided during each of the workshop sessions. Let's begin. The Invest in Cook program is a direct outcome of our long-range transportation plan connecting Cook County, which is the first RTP we've done in over 75 years under the leadership of President Tony Preckwinkle. In order to have a full appreciation for the Invest in Cook program, I will need to provide you with some background regarding our long-range plan. It provides the framework through which department officials plan for the future and implement sound transportation policies and investments. The plan was developed by county staff with assistance and analytical support provided by our consultant, AECOM, and their team of subcontractors. Going back to December 2011, Cook County adopted a complete streets policy. As part of this effort, the department was renamed from the Highway Department to the Department of Transportation and Highways to reinforce the need to plan for and better accommodate all transportation users. The department began looking beyond its traditional role of simply building and maintaining roadways and bridges. Our long-range transportation plan connecting Cook County was the next step in our evolution. It was launched in 2013 and approved in the summer of 2016. As it was being developed, we worked with thousands of people gathering input from residents, businesses, and transportation stakeholders from around the region to make sure we fully understood the existing needs of our communities, capture the resources that we had to work with, and identify the right priorities for the county. The final plan identifies 5 priorities, which we'll discuss now. The number 1 priority is public transportation. Even though we have an extensive transit network in the Chicago metropolitan area, ridership has been stagnant over the last several decades, in part because the region invests less on a per capita basis than many international and national urban counterparts. Furthermore, Cook County has long prioritized the automobile as the preferred mode of personal travel by focusing on roads and bridges to the exclusion of other modes. Cars, of course, will continue to have a central role in serving the mobility needs of our county residents. However, the county must complement its road work with transit improvements and fully embrace other modes such as walking, biking, car sharing, and ride sharing. The county fully supports the CMAP goal of doubling transit ridership by 2040, and our plan makes a commitment to expanding transit service so as to achieve it. Our department also completed its own transit plan last year, and that is available for viewing on our website. Freight is our second priority, and an industry sector that provides us with a competitive advantage that few other regions in the continent enjoy. Our region's freight cluster supports more than 176,000 jobs that $12.3 billion in personal income. Metropolitan Chicago's freight cluster has the potential to add even more jobs and businesses at a faster rate than other commercial sectors and in greater numbers than at the two other largest freight centers in the U.S. But the transportation infrastructure must enable that growth by positioning ourselves today for the opportunities of tomorrow. Some efforts are already underway, such as the CREATE program and the streamlining of truck permit will require renewed support, revitalization, and county input. In the fall of 2018, our Board of Commissioners approved the Cook County Freight Plan, which takes an in-depth look at the current performance of the freight system in the county and provides an action plan to implement policy, program, and project recommendations. Implementation of the freight plan's recommendations will ensure that Cook County maintains its preeminent role in the movement of freight in North America. The third priority is equity. The purpose of transportation is to provide access to opportunity. Transportation is the way people get to jobs, school, healthcare, recreational activities, and much more. Within Cook County, however, transportation services and the opportunities they afford have not been and are not equally distributed. The inequality in access to quality transportation facilities, jobs, and services is most evident in South Cook. Residents of South Cook have the longest commutes and the lowest access to jobs within Cook County. Our department completed a South Cook mobility study in 2019 to identify specific areas for improvement in the South Cook area. And we will expand on this study in the upcoming Cook County Transit Plan that will have been completed actually in 2020, last year. The fourth priority is to maintain and modernize the transportation facilities we currently have. Maintaining what exists has always been and will always be a priority for Cook County. Failure to maintain what already exists has major negative consequences, resulting in higher operating costs, delays, and congestion. Research has shown that it is 3 to 4 times more expensive to restore pavement once it is fully degraded than to keep it in a state of good repair through regular upkeep. We must also embrace new technology as a way to modernize our system to make more efficient use of limited resources. The fifth and final priority is to increase our investments in transportation. The Texas Transportation Institute indicates that the cost of congestion in the Chicago region is the third highest in the nation. The Metropolitan Planning Council in Chicago places the cost of congestion as high as $7.3 billion per year. To make a dent in this level of congestion, we need to be smarter about how we spend the money we already have and find more funding. Cook County will continue to push for the reallocation of existing and new funds in ways that align with its transportation priorities at the local, state, and federal level. We will also continue applying for competitive federal and state grants to supplement local resources. And this is an area where we've had greater success in the last few years. Now we will move on to a description of some recent county activities that have assisted in implementing the vision of connecting Cook County, including the creation of the Invest in Cook program. As can be seen, there have been several studies done resulting in plans and the implementation of departmental policies consistent with our LRTP. Invest in Cook, an $8.5 million grant program, is the first major initiative to come out of Connecting Cook County. And its goal is to identify projects that advance our priorities through partnerships and collaboration with our municipalities and transportation agencies. If we want to make significant progress in the priorities we've set, then we must have a way to systematically identify, prioritize, implement local projects that make network improvement. We also want to provide assistance on projects that have tremendous merit or potential, but otherwise might be held up or languish because of a lack of local match or a lack of local staff resources. In this next slide, we see the evolution of the department's development in turning these new priorities we discussed into actual plans and policies for implementation going forward as a result of the Invest and Cook program. At this point in the year 2020-21, we are 4 years into the Invest and Cook program and have just kicked off our 5th year. The development of this program was coordinated with multiple internal and external stakeholders, including the Cook County Bureau of Economic Development, the Department of Planning and Development, who are also joining us later today. This year marks the 2nd year we are coordinating our efforts with Planning and Development through these joint workshops in an effort to assist applicants who may want to apply for both programs as may be appropriate for their specific project. Our TA and CMAP were also interviewed at the development of our Invest and Cook program for suggestions and also reviewed early drafts of program materials. Again, CMAP helped develop the qualitative review process and facilitates our final departmental evaluation workshop. Who is eligible to apply for Invest and Cook? Eligible entities include local governments, villages, townships, and cities, transit agencies such as RTA, CTA, PACE, METRA, natural resource or public land agencies such as the Forest Reserves, Land Trusts, Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and private entities, including not-for-profits, CNT, NPC, ATA, TMAs, or others that do transportation service planning and coordination, as well as for-profits if they have a public sponsor. Each government entity is allowed a single project application. The types of projects that would be eligible include transit projects, bike ped projects, freight, roadway, bridge improvements, new technology such as fleet retrofits, electric charging stations, ITS, etc., corridor studies, and other projects. The list provided in the program description on our website is not meant to be exhaustive. Projects can be in any phase, from planning studies to construction. This differentiates us from other funding programs like CMAC or local STP funding. We would like to see projects on local facilities. This is a program we developed partially as a response to requests from municipalities for us to participate in funding on local jurisdiction roadways. And we want this to be the formal process through which we can determine which projects are selected. That said, we won't totally disallow project proposals on county road if that project proposal is among your organization's top priorities, and it's an idea that we might not otherwise consider. We are not, however, funding employee salaries through this program. This is a project-based program, and we do not want to be in the business of funding positions. We do understand the need for staff, and for communities that can demonstrate a need, we will provide staff assistance. Now I would like to talk about the application itself. In designing the application process, simplicity was the primary consideration. We created a fillable PDF application form formatted similar to what the county was already using for their Cdbg applications, consisting only of checkboxes and text fields. A rough cost estimate is sufficient, not a precise engineering estimate. If after our evaluation and interview, we are considering funding a project, then we will investigate deeper and use our staff to evaluate costs and develop an appropriate award amount. No technical expertise is required to fill out the application. And the next slide. Again, this is one of the things that really set our program apart from others, in that we provide assistance to applicants that demonstrate need. Need is determined by CMAP's sliding scale of community need. We offer to manage projects that local municipalities either don't have the capacity or authority to lead by themselves. The county could lead projects that cross municipal boundaries also. The availability of DOTH staff is subject to some variability, and so please, if you have a need in that area, ask early. The ultimate goal is to have submissions from all municipalities, no matter their ability to develop material for a project application, and to ensure that we get quality projects so that we can see them through to final construction. This slide shows some of the points that we've mentioned regarding the form itself. Please do not upload a scanned application, and please make sure that your application is filled out completely. When you're ready to submit the application form, point your browser to the Invest in Cook page and click on the button that reads Invest in Cook 2021 Grant Application. Fill out all the fields. In particular, please provide a concise one-paragraph description of your project. Upload your form, make sure it's complete, and save it before uploading. Make sure all of your supporting documentation is ready, and take care that uploads meet the file size limits. Please refrain from attaching entire plans or large documents. Only attach pertinent pages of plans and documents supporting your application. Once your application form and all supporting documents are uploaded, press submit. You should receive a confirmation email shortly after submitting your application. If you experience any problems, please reach out to us at investincook.cc at cookcountyil.gov. Do not send us the application via email. Your project will not be accepted. Again, just a review of the tips. Please make sure that your application is filled out completely. Please describe your project in the appropriate spaces and be as specific as possible within the limits of the application itself. Now we can discuss the evaluation of the projects, the applications, and talk about the different measures that we utilize. We use a combination of measures. The general measures, as mentioned, we'll be making sure that each application is complete and that we have all the required responses. We do an initial review. If you've forgotten a document, we will notify you and give you a few days to submit that missing document. All required documents should be submitted at the time of application, including your application itself, the mayor or chief executive's cover letter, a project area map, project schedule, and the most recent auditor's report or other proof of financial standing. Related to quantitative measures, we've developed metrics that correspond to the priorities in connecting Cook County. And for qualitative measures, we do a staff review of each application. including an in-depth review of the project description, the specific elements and attributes of the projects, and ability of the applicant to complete their projects. All project applications are mapped and sorted by their mode type, and that we compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. Freight projects are competing with other freight projects, bike projects with our bike projects, and so on. Each mode evaluated is evaluated on mode-specific metrics. If we can advance the slide, please. Thank you. We've sourced data from CMAP, IDOT, UIC Urban Transportation Center, and CNT. Metrics were selected to correspond directly with the priorities in connecting Cook County, and they are also consistent with FHWA and state recommendations. After projects are mapped and sorted by mode, they will be buffered. Buffers are dependent on the project type, and count elements within the buffer area of the buffer. The scoring will be on a scale of 0 to 100, with projects using percent rank scoring methodology for each metric, in which the highest scoring project will get all the points, the lowest scoring project will get no points, and everything else will be awarded a percentage of the total based on where they are placed along the scale. The goal is an understanding of the quantifiable aspects of the places in which these projects are located. As for the qualitative assessment, in the next slide, each qualified application receives an interview with 2 of our department staff evaluators who do an in-depth review of your application. Considerations include a review of the project's readiness, feasibility. Is the schedule reasonable? Are costs estimated and reasonable? Do we have confidence in the applicant to complete the project? Is there any opposition to the project in the community or in the local municipal body, legislative body of the community? Well, we will be calling some of our partners to weigh in on the projects and applications, and we will be interviewing all applicants. The review of project benefits also includes questions in terms of the reasonable benefits proposed. Is the project consistent with your own existing plans within your community? And what elements of the project advance our priorities in our long-range transportation plan? We also look at the leverage ratio of investment. What is the municipality contributing towards this project? And what are other sources of funding are being utilized? Since 2019, very low and low need communities, as designated by CMAP, will be expected to match county funds on at least a 1-to-1 basis. Matches from moderate need communities will be calculated on a sliding scale. Very high and high need communities may not need a local match at all. Now I would like to review some slides that show the summary, a summary of applications received over the last 4 years. The program has advanced the county's long-range transportation plan. All of the funded projects have met at least one of the priorities set in connecting Cook County. The program has been multimodal, and each of the 4 years we have awarded projects in the transit, bike ped, freight, and road modes of transportation. The program has funded early stage studies that position projects for other fund sources that only cover design or construction costs. Many of the projects selected and funded are in the planning or preliminary engineering phases, beginning to create a pipeline of projects that are positioned to be eligible for funding from other sources. The investment program has made awards in all Cook County districts. In 2017, 42 municipalities benefited from projects that were awarded that year. In 2018, 33 communities benefited. In 2019, 27 communities, and in 2020, 30 communities benefited from Invest in Cook awards. The county's total four-year investment of nearly $32 million in awards was matched by an additional $94 million in federal, state, or local funds. And the next slide, we see a breakdown of each year, the number of applications and dollars requested. And in the next slide, we see breakdowns of each of the 4 years and the types of modes for which people have applied. I would now like to move on to a section in which we will provide examples of some projects that have been awarded. Please bear with us while we transition to another presentation format. One moment, please.
Thank you, Tim, and everyone here listening. First up, we have a pace. First up, hi everyone. Thank you, Tim, and everyone here listening in on our workshop today. It's truly been my pleasure to have worked on Invest in Cook for 4 years now, this being the 5th year of the program, and I'm excited and encouraged to see such strong participation this many years in. In this section, I'm going to quickly go over a handful of projects that we funded in previous years. We think demonstrate some of what we're looking for in the applications that we receive when we're considering projects for funding and Invest in Cook. First up, we have a PACE-led pilot to improve last mile connectivity for riders who need to get to their homes and to work during non-traditional third shift, night shift commuting times. This pilot will be focused on 2 specific areas, one around the Harvey Transportation Center in the village of Harvey, and the second being the South Cargo area at O'Hare International Airport. The Harvey Transportation Center, it actually serves as a hub and a nighttime terminus for PACE's only 24/7 bus route, the 352 Halstead bus. During the day, this route actually continues further south, but at night it terminates at the transportation center, which potentially leaves third shift transit riders stranded with no transit option for that final leg of their trip. PACE is proposing to help make up for this lapse in service by subsidizing the cost of a TNC trip for riders who end up at the transportation center during the overnight hours. In this way, riders will be guaranteed a ride to from the transportation center, no matter what time it is, and kind of offer them the security to make a trip via transit, no matter what the situation. Similarly, riders who need to get to and from the O'Hare South Cargo area, which is another place where third shift work is common and hard to access via transit, will be provided a subsidized ride to and from the Rosemont Transit Center. The Rosemont Transit Center acts as a hub for both PACE and CTA transit services, and actually provides a good connection for a large number of residents, both in the city of Chicago and in Cook County. This project advances the number 1 priority in connecting Cook County, our long-range transportation plan, and we really thought it was an innovative solution for a relatively small but important group of transit riders that are difficult and hard to provide service to with kind of those traditional full-size buses. The guaranteed ride gives riders some feeling of security and knowing that they won't be stranded if their work hours go beyond the normal daytime service. This next project is a trail project originally led by the village of Burnham. It's now being led by Cook County. It was originally proposed to be a preliminary engineering study for a grade separated trail bridge over 5 railroads that kind of cross the border between the village of Burnham and the city of Chicago. The bridge, once constructed, would help connect the 2 Burnham Greenway trail segments that were nearing construction, one to the north, led by the Illinois Department of Natural Resources in Chicago, and another Burnham-led extension going south. Um, but both of these projects ran into obstacles when the railroad operators who own and manage the tracks that this trail would be crossing did not approve at grade crossing on the tracks on Burnham Avenue. The county kind of jumped into the process and has since taken the lead on this grade separated crossing project. We are fully funding the engineering and construction of the bridge with the help of $2 million crossing safety grant coming from the Illinois Commerce Commission. Originally, we saw this project as a local project advancing the completion of kind of a regionally significant trail network. After getting involved with the project and its stakeholders, we realized how complicated it was, how it crossed jurisdictional boundaries. It dealt with railroads, it dealt with ComEd and utilities. So we made the choice to fully commit to the project, kind of help appease the railroads in quick fashion and let the other 2 segments kind of move forward with their design and engineering processes. This project really advances our transportation alternatives priority, and it advances a project in a disadvantaged, lower income part of the county. So we were happy to be in a position to kind of provide assistance and get a project that was stuck for almost a decade. The Burnham project was stuck, and we kind of helped unstuck it and figure out a way forward for that project by kind of taking over this one. Here's a project submitted to us by the Illinois International Port District. It's another project that we helped advance by kind of taking lead over at least a portion of it. The Port District originally applied to funding to fix both the rail spur and the roadway section along Butler and Stony Avenue. But we don't have any experience repairing or engineering for rail spurs, so we cut that part of out of the project and focused mostly on the roadway. The Port District is interesting. It actually handles more seaborne tonnage than any other port on the Great Lakes, and is one of the busiest inland ports in the world. The Lake Calumet facility itself sees more than 300 trucks per day and helps move more than 18 million tons of bulk materials every year. And that's material that we really don't want to see on our road and rail facilities. We want to be moving that on water. The impacts are less severe to infrastructure there, and the impacts on congestion and everything else would be extreme if we had to move this by road or rail. Unfortunately, this valuable local asset has been kind of underappreciated and its facilities neglected to the point of significant disrepair. As you can see in the pictures, Butler Drive and Stony Island Avenue are in especially poor condition. Drainage issues have even impacted the function of the rail spur that runs parallel to the roadway. The proposed improvements and the ones that we approved and we're leading will bring the roadway part of that project to a modern and kind of safe state of good repair and improve drainage along the facility. It'll help kind of keep and maintain the port's kind of competitive advantage by improving those facilities. Um, this project helps advance our second priority, our freight priority in the long-range transportation plan, in an area that is severely lacking in resources and has been neglected for a number of years. Cook County staff also helped prepare an IDOT Economic Development Program grant that will be providing the project with an additional $2 million in construction funding. Overall, the project is consistent with kind of our broader set of priorities and really helps advance a project that might have otherwise flown under the radar due to kind of lack of resources available at the Port District. This is a freight-related project in the village of Berkeley that we funded that proposed improvements to a section of Proviso Drive that helps serve the Union Pacific Proviso Rail Yard, which is actually one of the largest in the United States. The roadway serves up to 3,100 vehicles a day. 68% of that traffic is large trucks. As the pictures demonstrate, the roadway is in awful condition. Even though it serves as an important artery, um, both for the rail yard and a number of businesses, freight-related businesses located in kind of low to moderate income community. The proposed project not only brings the roadway up to a state of good repair, but it also brings geometric improvements that will provide for the safe movement of freight vehicles. It will help foster more efficient operations and growth in the freight sector and reinforce freight supportive land uses in the area. We've actually funded 2 phases of this project. It started with phase 1 funding in 2017. Once they're complete with that, they submitted again, and we were awarded them construction funding for kind of the local match for the construction phase of the project. And we kind of see this as a demonstration of how our program can be used, one, to kind of queue up projects and get them ready for advanced engineering and construction, but also as kind of maybe a piece of that last part of the puzzle where we provide match funding that gets a project to construction or maybe gets it unstuck from a position where they're kind of scrambling for the final piece of that funding puzzle. So, I mean, not only that, it advances our freight priority in a community that has, in some cases, been underserved or been disproportionately affected by the amount of freight infrastructure that they have to deal with. Here's a project that's freight related, but we're looking at it more from the perspective of how it mitigates or helps mitigate the impact of freight infrastructure on the communities that surround it. This study is being led by the South Suburban Mayors and Managers, and it's looking at 10 at-grade rail roadway crossings and what their impact is on travel delays in the neighboring communities of Dalton and Riverdale. The study will assess kind of the infrastructure needs, look at development potential along some of the corridors in the area, and engage the public on what their preferences are on how these intersections are treated, which ones might be the highest priority intersections, and what improvements they might prefer. The end goal will be kind of a short list of intersections and places where improvements such as grade separations or capital improvements that might be needed to designate quiet zones, where those things might be implemented, and where we might prioritize doing them first and as quick as possible. This project, it'll bring significant quality of life benefits to the kind of disadvantaged, relatively low income communities Dalton and Riverdale. These are places that deal with a kind of disproportionate level of impact from rail and freight infrastructure that much of the rest of the region kind of benefits from being the kind of a freight capital of the nation, whereas these folks kind of deal with all the impacts and all the negative externalities of that infrastructure without so much of the benefits that come with it. Um, it also supports the freight industry, helping it to kind of coexist with communities, even where their infrastructure can cause kind of serious impacts to the speed and reliability of people's daily trips. Finally, the last project we'll be going over comes from the village of Schaumburg. They are proposing improvements to 7 intersections to replace the old loop-style vehicle detection systems with more modern and flexible video camera detection hardware. These 7 intersections that are located in and around the Woodfield Mall area of the village are chronically congested and the subject of many community concerns about safety and delay. The installation of this modern signal control hardware will allow for improvements that benefit not only vehicle drivers, but they'll have benefits for transit service providers, helping move those vehicles through those intersections a bit quicker. Also, emergency service vehicles, better control of pedestrian and better control and safety for pedestrians and bicyclists as well. This isn't necessarily the biggest or fanciest project, but the safety and reliability improvements emphasize the importance that we place in not just maintaining transportation facilities in Cook County, but also modernizing them to adopt the most current standards and technologies and deploying uh, those improvements in places where we think that they'll have the most benefit. Um, so before I turn the presentation back over to Tim, I did want to say that this is just a small sample of projects that we funded through Invest in Cook. We funded projects from all over the county that run the entire range of modal types and implementation phases. I do want to emphasize that Invest in Cook is meant to be an implementation tool for a long-range transportation plan connecting Cook County. And your projects will be more competitive if you can clearly demonstrate how your project advances our policy priorities. That said, we don't think that the benefits will accrue simply to the county itself. We think that the projects you submit should be mutually beneficial and provide benefits that accrue to any and all county residents. And with that note, I'll pass the presentation.
Sorry, Tim, you go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Ben. This slide now shows the Invest in Cook 2021 schedule. We began the application period on January 13th, and per our past tradition, it's open for approximately 2 months. We will close on March 12th at 5 p.m. The evaluation of the projects will begin immediately upon closing and is conducted by our staff through April and into May. We then recommend a program to our leadership within the department and then on up the chain of command to the president's office. And it is our objective to have the July 22nd Cook County Board meeting approve the program that will have been developed by that point. The draft IGAs and award letters are sent out shortly thereafter. So I know there have been some questions coming in, and we are going to attempt to answer those questions now. So a reminder in the chat, button, you will have an opportunity to ask questions. And then there's also a hand button if you're working through the Teams format where you can ask that we unmute you so that you can ask a question. So with the help of my colleagues, let's now attempt to answer some of those questions that have been posted thus far.
All right, so I've got the list of questions pulled up. The first few came from Judith Alexander. She was asking, with so many people working from home now and many companies planning to continue these arrangements, do you anticipate reduced congestion in the future? And I was just going to say, well, I wasn't really expecting any tough planning questions, but I don't really have a crystal ball, so I don't want to predict what people will do after we do get vaccinated, after we build some community immunity to COVID-19. But I mean, all I can do is point to kind of historical precedent and say that, you know, when people see empty roads, they tend to want to fill them. I like, we are a large, busy metro area, and people will want to move around again, whether they change their behavior slightly, or maybe change the times in which they're actually on the roads. Maybe traffic is a bit better distributed, but I don't want to predict those things. I do know that our transportation networks continue to be strained, and we're trying to do our best to make sure we build in improvements to that transportation network that prepare us best for the future. Judith had another question. Would streetscapes qualify for an Invest in Cook grant? It would improve pedestrian friendliness and safety. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, like, streetscape projects do qualify. You can submit an application for them, but they don't necessarily stand by themselves as very competitive unless you can really build a case for the pedestrian improvements that you'd be providing, whether it's safety, reliability of trips, what have you. I mean, like, if it's just aesthetic improvements to streetscape, we're less inclined to score that well, and it usually doesn't do as well in our evaluation. And I don't know if anyone on my team wants to add to that, but
No, I think that's a crucial point, is that really, fixing sidewalks and allowing more pedestrian space for movement is one thing, but I mean, we are a transportation company, so it does tend to be that unless there's a sort of a pedestrian movement benefit, streetscape improvement in itself may not score very well.
Finally, Judith also asked, could two local governments apply together? Absolutely, two local governments can partner on an application, can go in together and submit one project. We actually look at it on some of those projects pretty favorably, because we see ourselves as kind of good entities to be the bridge between multiple communities, to both maybe be the lead on those projects, maybe be the middle person that collects the funding for a bigger project that might be more meaningful to the county and the neighboring communities as a whole. Also as an entity that can kind of ensure kind of cohesiveness between the two communities. And we just like to see local governments working together on transportation solutions and getting their priorities aligned. The one thing we would ask is that when you do submit an application, if you're partnering with another community, that one community actually submits the project and acts as the project lead, and maybe lead point of contact for us, with the other being like kind of there in a letter of support or some other documentation, letting us know that you're working together on the project. So Paul Zaremba asked a question about corridors, what is allowed.
And Tomo, I combine that with what Richard Chambers is asking too.
For,
Can we
oh,
combine
yeah.
a bicycle project with a road modernization project?
Yeah. As far as like corridors go, I mean, just about anything that's a transportation corridor matters to us. And maybe we can be a little bit broader than some other organizations. Like in our bike planning, we've been looking at ComEd and utility corridors for possible bike trail improvements where there's the land available and they connect to something meaningful, but also like kind of roadway corridors, those types of studies that look at the land uses adjacent to it, or the looking at the corridor for possible infrastructure improvements and needs and how those might be funded or engineered or planned. And I think Paul had a subsequent question about studies, engineering, and planning costs being allowable, and all of those costs, any phase of a project is eligible from the very kind of beginning, preliminary studies, feasibility type studies, all the way out to engineering and construction are all allowable costs under the Invest in Cook program.
Yeah, and I'd just say it's generally true. You know, with a complete streets policy, it's a lot of it is just about making sure that, you know, the road infrastructure for cars is nicely defined and the bike infrastructure gets better defined and the pedestrian infrastructure for that matter gets better defined. So certainly the extent to which you're combining a consideration of all modes, yeah, that's a better corridor study than one that is you know, more narrowly focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'd look for it to be multimodal, looking at everything top to bottom in a corridors type study. So and if you're looking at a more advanced stage of a project, I mean, you could combine the construction of, or maybe a resurfacing of a roadway with the addition of a shared lane or a bike facility, and that would be a project that we look favorably on because it would improve function for multiple users. Tessa asked where we could find the CMAP designations of the low-need communities. They call them community cohorts. I think Jack provided a link to the CMAP page where you can find them. And we'll also add a link to the Invest in Cook resources section just so that you can access it there. But they have a list. They break out communities into 4 cohorts, 4 being the highest need cohorts and 1 being the lowest need cohorts. So you can get to that list in the comment section where Jack provided a link, or soon after this meeting, we'll provide a link on the Invest in Cook page. Kyle couldn't see the slides. I am recording this presentation, so if you couldn't see the slides, then we will put a link up on Invest in Cook's site later with a link to a video recording of this presentation so that you can see them at that point. And if you have follow-up questions after seeing the slides and hearing the information from there, you can always reach out to Tim or I, and we can answer them via email.
All right, then. We are pushing frightfully close to the next hour, and we'll need to, of course, allow our friends in the planning department to do their presentation as well. But I do think we've timed it pretty well as we've covered all the questions.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Bennett. Thank you, Tomo, for responding to the questions. Thank you all for participating. And as Bennett mentioned, we will now like to turn it over to our colleagues in the Department of Planning and Development. They will start at 2 or shortly thereafter so that their people can also assemble. Thank you all. The information will be provided on our Invest in Cook website if you miss anything today. Have a good day. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dominic Tassi from the Department of Planning and Development. We'll give it a few minutes for folks to assemble and get started shortly. Thanks. Hi again, all. Just wanted to let folks know we're giving a couple minutes for folks to assemble. We'll get started in a moment. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Cdbg Capital Improvement Application Workshop. My name is Dominic Tassi. I'm the Deputy Director of Community Development in the county's Department of Planning and Development. For those who participated in the Invest in Cook workshop immediately before, thanks for sticking around. For those just joining for the Cdbg portion of the workshop, thanks for your participation. Can you advance the slide, please? Thank you. For today's agenda, I'll be short and sweet with just a few overall comments before turning it over to representatives from ComEd to discuss some energy efficiency programs that may be of interest to your potential Cdbg project or perhaps other needs your organization or municipality may have. Then the bulk of the time will be spent on an overview of the Cdbg capital improvement application process and requirements. We will take questions after the ComEd presentation and then again after the application overview. You can put questions in the chat throughout the presentation, and there will be an opportunity to raise your hand via the Teams interface during the 2 question periods to ask a question. This session is being recorded and will be made available on our website afterward, along with a list of the questions and answers. Lastly, for my part of the presentation, I want to highlight a few things. First, only the capital improvement application is now available. I've included the due date on the slide and time, because you can never say that enough, as well as the application website at the bottom of the slide. But wanted to note this in particular because in recent years we have released the Cdbg capital improvement application and the Cdbg public services and planning application at the same time and on the same timeline. This year, the Cdbg public services and planning application will be released a little bit later in the year. We don't quite know the date yet, but stay tuned. We'll get communications out as that time approaches. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight is, same as last year, we allowed nonprofits to make one application for Cdbg capital improvement for a capital improvement project, and also one under the Cdbg public service and planning umbrella. And in prior years, applicants had to choose one or the other. So we're continuing that this year, allowing for one application of each type from nonprofits only. Other than that combination, there's a limit of one funding application per agency. So with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Amy Populorum from ComEd.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? I'll take that as a yes. Great.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having us on today. You can go to the next slide. My name, as Don said, is Amy Populorum. I'm with the ComEd Energy Efficiency team, and joining me today is Joe Mays from Resource Innovations, who is our outreach lead for municipalities and really can help anyone with the program. So today we're going to do a very quick overview, a lightning round overview of a few specialized programs for distressed communities and nonprofit organizations that you might be able to consider in your Cdbg application process. These programs offer unique and often higher incentives when you qualify. So we do have some information about our other programs in an appendix with this presentation, but we wanted to focus on these today. And you will get the presentation, and we have contact info and all of that. So Joe will be happy to help you with any energy efficiency needs you have. And it sounds like we'll do a little bit of a Q&A. So we'll do our best on that. And then if there are any questions outstanding, we'll get those for you and get the answers back out to you. So with that, we'll move ahead. And as I said, we're going to move quickly. There will be some detail about finite offering details. We won't get into that in too much detail, but it's here for you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. So we'll start with small business and public small facilities. Those programs have expanded in 2021. They did very well, and they were very helpful to the ComEd footprint in the pandemic. So we've expanded those programs this year by increasing the peak demand. So private has increased from 100 to 200 peak demand, and public has increased from 100 to 400 kW peak demand. So what that means is if you have your peak demand is a little higher than 100 and you were missing out before, you're now eligible to work in those programs. Next slide, please. So let's segue now into a few of our distressed communities programs. The first one that we'll cover, again, briefly is the Streetlights program that we have started this year. And I think the timing is good. It sounds like based on the prior hour, you were talking about transportation and whatnot. So this Streetlights program is applicable to the 41 communities that you see here. And those are communities in their entirety. So as I'll go through this, you'll see that depending on the distressed communities program, there is a nuance or two that is different from some of the others, but we're here to help you navigate that. But it's tailored to make sure that the communities in need are taking advantage of the funds that are available. So this is the 41 communities. It will apply to the full community as long as the street light lights a public roadway and the fixture is being replaced, not just the light itself. So if you're just replacing lights, you can check on the instant discounts program, because that is a program where you can just go buy the lights and do that replacement yourself. Next slide. So in terms of what you get with the Streetlights program, to quickly recap, it is for the 41 communities we just saw. And EE will cover, energy efficiency will cover up the labor of up to $150 per unit when you have someone install for you. If you install yourselves, you forgo that 150, but it's there to help you offset the cost of labor for putting in those lights. The other thing that we're doing is, depending on the wattage, we will reimburse you up to the mid-range cost that we've identified based on averages for a particular wattage. So in that first column there, you see 400 watt replacement. The typical cost for a fixture is $300 to $400. So we've chosen the midpoint of $350 to be the maximum reimbursable amount. And you can see how that changes with different wattages. Next slide, please. Another one of our programs that is growing in, it's kind of growing in steam and popularity, is what we call the Public Buildings and Distressed Communities offering, or PBDC. And it is essentially a program that offers no cost, low cost HVAC tune-ups, HVAC optimization, and lighting kits to communities that qualify. Next slide, please. So unlike streetlights, where the entire community is eligible, this program is based on zip codes. So you can see on the left some of the examples of public facilities that qualify for this, but then you need to be in a certain footprint by zip code. So over at the right in the corner, you can see a map that's got some turquoise there. Those are the areas that qualify. But by going into this eligible map link, you will find whether you qualify. And again, the program is there to help you. And if you have any issues, seeing if you qualify, again, we're here to help. And but that way it's honing in on specific distressed community zones, if you will, by zip code. Next slide, please. So moving on to nonprofit organizations, we have a program for various types of organizations, such as you see here, that are nonprofit. The eligibility for this program is also unique. We work with Elevate Energy on this program, and they run the whole thing. They will guide you through the process, including your eligibility. And we have their contact information at the end of the presentation, and also Joe's, and you can reach out to Joe, and Joe will get you in touch with them if that's easier for you as well. Next slide, please. So the criteria for eligibility for this program, there are several levels of eligibility. First, you must be a 501c3. Your peak demand must be between under 400 kW, and your electric account with ComEd must have been in place and active for at least 60 days prior to you applying. Importantly, there's another layer to this program in that it also requires a service component, a service requirement. So your organization needs to provide some sort of direct service to one or more at-risk populations. So for example, your organization might provide transitional housing via food pantry, youth programming, some kind of clinic, healthcare providers, etc. It needs to have a service to an at-risk population, an in-need population. So a house of worship or a private school doesn't automatically get in. You need to have some sort of community serving program to apply for this particular energy efficiency incentive. That can't just be to the members of your house of worship or enrollees in the school. So to move on to talk a little bit more about what you get with this offering, next slide, please. Similar to the Public Buildings and Distressed Communities program, this program does focus a lot on lighting and HVAC offerings, but it also goes further in that it provides technical and financial planning assistance. And it also has a network, a closed network of energy efficiency service providers who are trained to do the work for this specific program. So you can take advantage of that. Next slide, please. So to switch gears, we have what we call facility assessments, and they're a gateway into the program. So, you know, this is something that you can take advantage of. You don't have to have a particular program in mind or, you know, something, you know, certainly if you have any improvements planned, I would definitely encourage you to reach out and get a facility assessment done if you haven't before. But what will happen is essentially someone from our staff, we have a lot of folks who do this, they will, depending on the program, they'll come out to your facility, they'll walk it, they'll, you know, look around and tour it essentially, and they will come back to you within a short time frame and give you a report with recommendations on things that you can do to reduce your energy consumption. There could be things that are measures like replace a particular piece of equipment, but oftentimes there are things that are low cost or no cost, such as just making sure that your thermostat is going up and, you know, raising and lowering at the right times of day and things like that you can implement and get immediate savings that can then, if you wish, be channeled back into future projects. So we're doing this both virtually and in person right now during the pandemic, because we realize that different types of facilities have different needs and barriers to entry sometimes. And so this is, you know, that's completely your choice. You know, certainly with someone inside your building, they're going to see more, but most often you have a good read on your own facilities and can help us where we can't physically be in the building there. So to get started on that, there obviously is that link there on the screen. Otherwise, you can reach out to Joe. Next slide, please. And then the last thing I'm going to cover quickly is what we call our Business Energy Analyzer tool, BEA. And this is a great tool. It is really easy to use. All you need is to go to the site and enter your account number and your zip code, and you're in. And there are, established reports that you can run. There are ways you can customize it to look over time. So if you look at the right, the graphic on the right, that's some sort of a report that's comparing some different usage over time. And then it's also a little bit tough to see, but there's a little set of red dots in there that's comparing it to likely a prior time, in your energy usage in a prior time frame. You can customize the time frames. You can create specialized reports. If you have, for example, a number of accounts that you think about them all together as sort of one group, you can group those in here and get, one netted number. So there are a lot of neat things you can do. Another thing that we provide in this tool is the heat map you see on the left. And what this is essentially depicting is that the green is, you're running efficiently, you're going a little higher in the yellow time periods, but the red ones are indicating that something was significantly higher for one reason or another. This could mean that you're running a program in a building that's usually closed on the weekend and you had it open all day, things like that. But it allows you to go in and, it empowers you to look at your timing, what's happening in your facilities, and to be able to be a little bit more proactive about taking action to make sure that you're calibrated correctly and that things are in sync. So we highly encourage you to take advantage of that. It's another great gateway into the program. And then final slide, please. Yeah, so just here is a recap of our contacts. Joe is, like I said, he'll be able to be your main point of contact for anything, and then and he will be able to definitely answer some questions if we have those here. And then also for nonprofit, Dara Reef is the main contact, and we actually have a website for that you can just send an email to, that you'd like to be contacted. And also the phone numbers there. So with that, we thank you so much for giving us a little time. and the opportunity to meet with you. We wish you the best in 2021 and with your grant processes.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate you and Joe taking some time to talk through the programs, and I hope they can be helpful to our potential applicants, if not on projects you're thinking about for CDBG funding, perhaps for other needs that you have. Amy, I did want to just raise one question that did pop up. I think it came up specifically related to when you were talking about the Streetlight program. But the question was, is it possible for this program to be offered to all communities in Cook County?
There is a Streetlights program in place. So, and what I'm not sure, I know we work very closely with the city of Chicago on a concerted effort. There is a master plan that we work with them on. But if you have a specific question about a municipality, just jot your name and your contact info into the chat, and we can reach out to you very easily, or you can reach out to Joe at the email address there, and we'll be happy to help you out.
All right, thanks for that, Amy. All right, seeing no other questions, I'd like to turn it over to Sylvia Parham from the Department of Planning and Development to talk through the CDBG capital improvement application process. Thanks, Sylvia.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Cook County's 2021 CDBG Capital Improvement Application webinar. My name is Sylvia Parham, and I am the Grants Coordinator for the Bureau of Economic Development, Department of Planning and Development. During this portion of today's webinar, instructions will be provided for completing this year's 2021 Community Development Block Grant CDBG Program Capital Improvement Projects application. The nature of the CDBG program is Cook County Bureau of Economic Development, Department of Planning and Development, in collaboration with HUD, award grants to carry out a wide range of community development activities directed towards revitalizing neighborhoods, economic development, and providing improved community facilities and services. In addition, Cook County Department of Planning and Development within the Bureau of Economic Development is committed to developing and sustaining viable communities by fostering economic opportunities and business development, preserving and expanding the supply of decent, affordable housing, promoting fair housing, and supporting programs that address the problems of homelessness. In an effort to achieve each of these goals, the Department of Planning and Development administers grants received from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, otherwise known as HUD. The program provides annual grants on a formula basis to entitled cities and counties to develop viable urban communities by providing decent housing and a suitable living environment, and by expanding economic opportunities, principally for low and moderate income persons. The program is authorized under Title I of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. The content of the 2021 CDBG application webinar will consist of reviewing the national objectives, administrative requirements, eligible activities or projects, eligible project types, capital improvement project priorities, prohibited activities or projects, the threshold requirements, application evaluation criteria, application highlights, funding cycle updates, program funding cycle and timelines, and last but not least, the application review process. The first section that we're going to review is the national objectives. There are 3 objectives that must be met in order to qualify for CDBG funding. The CDBG program requires that each activity or project funded, except for program administration and planning activities, must meet one of the 3 national objectives as shown. An activity that does not meet a national objective is not compliant with CDBG requirements and is therefore ineligible for funding. Under the primary objective, we are looking to provide benefits to low and moderate income persons. And as you can see, the 70% of CDBG funds to assist LMI persons must be applicable in your application. There are also 4 methodologies that can be utilized to meet the national objectives, and they are listed as low-mod area benefit activities, low-mod limited clientele activities, low-mod housing activities, and low-mod job creation and retention activities. Under the low-mod area benefit activities, these activities must benefit all residents in a particular service area, where at least 50% of persons in the service area are low-mod income persons per income data that is released by HUD. The service area is determined based upon the nature of the activity and location of the activity. The service area must be determined prior to provisions of CDBG assistance. Examples of these eligible activities would include infrastructure, public facility, and economic development projects. Under the low-mod clientele, limited clientele activities, at least 51% of the beneficiaries of the proposed activity must be low and moderate income. In contrast to the low-mod area benefit activity category, it is not the low-mod area income concentration of the service activity that determines the eligibility, but rather the actual number of the low-mod income person that will benefit from the activity. In order to qualify under this category, an activity must benefit a clientele that is generally presumed to be principally low or mod income, to include abused children, battered spouses, elderly persons, severely disabled adults, homeless persons, illiterate adults, persons living with AIDS, and migrant farmers, just to name a few. The examples of the activities that would be eligible under this category would be public service and economic development. Under the low-mod housing activities, these activities must be undertaken with the purpose of providing or improving permanent residential structures, which upon completion, at least 51% of the units will be occupied by low and moderate income persons. Examples would be limited housing rehabilitation projects. And then last but not least, low-mod job creation and retention activities. These activities must be undertaken with the purpose of creating and retaining permanent jobs, at least 51%, which will be made available to or held by a low-mod income person. Examples would fall under the categories of public service and economic development. So as we go into the second objective is to aid in the prevention or elimination of slums or blight. There are 3 methodologies that can be utilized to meet this national objective, and that is prevent and eliminate slum and blight on an area basis, prevent or eliminate slum and blight on a spot basis, and then be in an urban renewal area. This section under prevent and eliminate slum and blight on an area basis is designated to areas in which the activity will occur must meet the definition of slum and blight, deteriorated or deteriorating areas under state and local law. In addition, the area must meet one of the 2 conditions. They must be a public improvement throughout the area. It must be at least 25% of the property throughout the area, and the examples would include demolition projects. Under the prevent and eliminate slum and blight on a spot basis, this category is designated for slum and blight, but these conditions exist on a spot basis. Examples would be also demolition projects. And last but not least, be in an urban renewal area. These activities must be located within an urban renewal project area or neighborhood development program action area that is necessary to complete an urban renewal plan. This category is rarely used as few communities have open urban renewal plans. And third but not last is the objective that meet a having a particular urgency, and this would be the urgent need project category. These urgent needs would pose a serious and immediate threat to the health and welfare of the community. It will provide existing conditions are recent origin or recently became urgent, and that would be within the past 18 months. And then the application is unable to be financed, and the activity is owned, and other sources of funding are not available. So this would conclude the national objective section, and we will proceed on to the next item. In addition to meeting a national objective, a project must also qualify based on their eligibility criteria. Cdbg funds may be used for projects which include but are not limited to construction and public facilities and improvements. These projects will consist of water and sewer facilities, streets, neighborhood centers, and the conversion of school buildings for eligible purposes. We also look at rehabilitation of residential and non-residential structures. These would also fall under the public facility category as it relates to services being provided for Scylla homes, HVAC repairs or replacement, roofing replacement, and ADA bathroom and kitchen upgrades or rehabilitation, etc. We also look at relocation and demolition. Under relocation, this section is triggered when a proposed demolition structure has not been vacant for at least 12 months. Provisions of assistance to profit-motivated businesses to carry out economic development and job creation and retention activities, as well as acquisition and real property. And as for our public service projects, that will be discussed during a later workshop. Activities related to energy conservation and renewable energy resources is also an eligible project. As we reviewed projects that are eligible under the Cdbg program, we must also keep in mind projects that are not eligible and that are prohibited activities. The following may not be assisted with Cdbg funds, and they are buildings or portions thereof used for the general conduct of government. We will also not be entertaining funding general government expenses, as well as political activities. And those activities would be Cdbg funds shall not be used to finance the use of facilities or equipment for political purposes. The second section basically outlines the following that generally may not be assisted with Cdbg funds, and that is the purchase of equipment, operating and maintenance expenses, new housing construction, and income payments. And the reason I say general is because we have looked at, depending on the type of project, we would look at purchasing of equipment such as stabilized equipment that would fall in the category if you're doing a rehab project and it's going to inquire that you have stationary stoves or refrigerators. We will possibly look at that, and as long as it cannot be removed or it is permanently affixed to the structure. So the number one question is, what projects will we look at considering for Cdbg funding, and what project types would be eligible under the Cdbg program? And we have a list here of infrastructure, public facility, demolition, and economic development projects, all of which would qualify under the Cdbg program. Under infrastructure, we look at streets and alley resurfacing, water main, bicycle and pedestrian improvements. We also look at transit accessibility. Under public facilities, we have recreational facilities, public parks, ADA compliant playgrounds, energy efficiency improvements, and disabled accessibility improvements. We have two other slides that will give you more details on the demolition and the economic development projects, but as listed here, we consider funding residential structures, vacant buildings, debris and asbestos removal. And under economic development, we look at the social economic development, social services, and micro enterprises. Demolition projects fall under two categories: slum, blight, spot basis, and urgent need. Under slum, blight, spot basis, we look at eliminating specific conditions of blight. and physical decay on a spot basis, and also demolition of dilapidated properties. Under the urgent need, we look for activities that alleviate emergency conditions, demolition structures that are severely damaged by a major disaster such as a fire, tornado, things of that nature. Also, existing conditions that pose a serious and immediate threat on the health and the welfare of the residents. And last but not least, we look at existing conditions that are of recent origin. And those are conditions that are within an 18-month disaster. So under demolition, we basically look at funding costs that are equal or exceed $20,000 per parcel. And these projects are typically submitted via the annual funding application period. The final section of this 2021 Cdbg capital improvement application will have a special form for demolition projects, which also must be completed and submitted with your application. Under economic development, we focus on 3 categories, and that is special economic development, microenterprise development, and social services and capacity building assistance. Under special economic development, Cdbg funds may be used to undertake economic development activities subject to the required public benefit standards being met regarding job creation and retention or provisions of goods and services. So therefore, we look at acquiring, constructing, reconstructing, rehabilitating, or installing commercial or industrial buildings, structures, and other eligible real property improvements. Capital-oriented special economic development projects will be restricted to projects undertaken and controlled by public and non-public entities. Under the microenterprise development section, which focuses on workforce development, these projects are designed to foster development, support, and expansion of microenterprise businesses, which are commercial enterprises with 5 or fewer employees, one of whom owns the enterprise. So we look at the general support of owners and persons developing into microenterprises. We look at financial support and the technical assistance aspects. And then we have the social service and capacity building assistance. This activity is targeted to increase the capacity for entities to carry out eligible neighborhood revitalization and economic development activities or projects. As we look at program requirements, we have eligible areas, eligible activities, which are projects, administrative requirements, and then we also have projects that are consistent with Cook County's current consolidated plan and the HUD planning low mod income data percentages that must be met. We have under the eligible areas, all projects are within Cook County's jurisdiction with the exception of 14. And those 14 consist of the City of Chicago, Evanston, Skokie, Arlington Heights, Des Plaines, Elgin, Hoffman Estates, Palatine, Mount Prospect, Schaumburg, Burin, Cicero, Oak Park, and Oak Lawn. These projects do not qualify under our Cook County jurisdiction, but they may have their own entitlement. Under eligible activities, we have, as we mentioned in previous slides, infrastructure, public facility, demolition, special economic development, social services, and micro enterprise projects. And these are all qualifying projects that will be eligible for Cdbg funding. Administrative requirements are requirements that most likely will be required if your project is awarded for Cdbg funding. We would require that the environmental reviews are reviewed and approved. We would also look at procurement, Davis-Bacon labor standards requirements that will be implemented, as well as Fair Housing Act, lead-based paint, relocation and acquisition as applicable. Also, the application must be consistent with Cook County's current consolidated plan, and we are moving that into implementation as we speak. And last but not least, we look at the HUD Community Planning Development Low Mod Income data. We will provide a link to that site in order for you to be able to review the census tract and block group and low mod income percentages as it is applicable to qualifying your project. As you prepare your application, we ask that you take a special look at the capital improvement project priorities. This section is located under the broader context of projects in the application. We ask that you describe how your proposed project is a part of a broader organizational strategic plan or vision and or consistent with an existing local plan, such as a comprehensive plan, a capital improvement plan, or a plan produced through CMAP's Local Technical Assistance Program or RTA's Community Planning Programs or similar programs. Also, we ask that you describe any connections to the Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways Invest in Cook program. So therefore, the sections that are laid out here under infrastructure, public facility, demolition, and economic development, we want you to take in consideration prioritizing multi-jurisdictional funding requests and to coordinate multiple infrastructure improvements into one single project. We also want you to look at prioritizing projects and programs that will help to address the job housing disconnect, particularly those in the South suburban areas. And then we want you to target infrastructure projects and programs that will promote economic development efforts. So we want to continue to support capital improvement projects for public facilities, as well as coordinate closely with other infrastructure resources. As you prepare your application, keep in mind the capital improvement threshold requirements that falls under capital improvement area benefit, capital improvement cap, and the maximum number of projects that actually can be applied for through this application cycle. Under the area benefit threshold, there used to be an exception where we would allow you to go below the 51% required threshold, but that no longer is available. However, you must make sure that the projects that you are submitting in your application does at least meet the minimum 51% criteria for infrastructure, water, sewer, or flood control projects. Also, we have a $400,000 cap for municipal infrastructure projects, and then a $200,000 cap for public facility projects. Make sure you do not exceed those caps, because your application may be put in the lower priority category if you're not complying with the caps that are listed here. Also, there's a maximum number of projects that could be applied for under this application, and that maximum number is 1 for any capital project. However, if you are applying for a public service project, you may apply for a public service project as well as 1 application for a capital improvement project. All Cdbg 2021 capital improvement applications submitted timely will be reviewed based on the evaluation criteria that's presented here. We have 8 categories. The categories are project need and justification. You will receive 35 points based on the need for the project. Under capacity and skills to execute the project, you will receive 25 points for that category. Under leverage, other fund is 10 points. That is not required, but every little amount that you provide is helpful. Clarity and reasonableness of proposed costs would be the information that you provide as certified by your engineer or by an architect or whomever will be preparing your cost estimates. Also, the broader context of projects, which I mentioned earlier, is going to be a 20-point score if the information that is provided meets our guidelines. And then we have 3 sections that you will not be given any points for, but you can possibly lose points if it's not appropriately noted. And that would be readiness to proceed. We want to make sure that this project can proceed in the time that it's submitted, and once the agreement is executed, if it's awarded, we want to make sure that you have documentation to support that it's ready to proceed. And then also we want to make sure that the fair housing and racial equity sections are completed in the application. And last but not least, we ask that the financial capacity, which is your audit financials, must be attached to the application upon submittal. Last but not least, please be careful to review the application checklist before submitting your application. You will lose 15 points for each missing required document that's being requested in the application. As we get closer to the end of the 2021 Cdbg Capital Improvement Application webinar, here are a few things to remember. The Cdbg application must be submitted utilizing the online submission page. We will not accept any emails nor paper copies. For municipalities, you must apply for one Cdbg capital improvement, demolition, or economic development project. However, nonprofit agencies may apply for one Cdbg capital improvement project and one Cdbg public service/planning project. Otherwise, there is a limit of one funding application per agency. Your project also must be consistent with the current Cook County Consolidated Plan, moving to implementation, and policy roadmap, including a focus on racial equity. Please do not forget to complete the Municipal Fair Housing Survey. This is only applicable to municipalities. Nonprofit agencies do not have to complete the Fair Housing Survey. However, you must complete this application by the due date of the original Cdbg application, and if we do not receive the survey, there will be a 10-point penalty. Make sure you double check all census tract and block group and low mod income percentages. Again, this is applicable to the municipality infrastructure projects. As for the nonprofit agencies, you will be required to make sure that you comply with the limited clientele category. Please make sure that the municipalities follow the low mod income data, which is provided here on this website link, and make sure that your census tract, block group, and low mod income percentages are applied appropriately. We ask that you focus on the southern suburbs for the 2021 application cycle with an emphasis on connections to the South Suburban Economic Growth Initiative. The website is here and you could pull that up to get more information as it relates to that category. We also ask that you put an emphasis on regional collaboration, which is consistent with the On to 2050 Comprehensive Regional Plan, and that project implementation within the context of a broader municipal or organizational strategic plan or vision. We also want you to make sure that you review all of the documents before you submit your application. Also follow the checklist just to make sure that you have all of the required information that's being requested in the application. Last but not least, the applications again are due on March 12, 2021, 5:00 p.m. Central Standard Time. Make sure your application is submitted timely to avoid not being funded for this cycle. The program funding cycle and timeline is as follows. Cdbg program year will begin October 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2022. The applications were listed or posted online on January 13th, 2021. The webinar is today, January 27th, 2021. All applications are due by March 12th, 2021 at 5:00 p.m. Central Standard Time. The applications will be reviewed beginning March 2021 through May 2021. The Economic Development Advisory Committee will have a public hearing and will review the recommended capital improvement application projects on June 2021. The Cook County Board of Commissioners will review and approve all applications that were considered in the recommendation on July 29, 2021. And last but not least, the issuance of the subrecipient agreement awards will take place in August of 2021. If you have any questions as you begin to prepare your 2021 Cdbg Capital Improvement application, please feel free to contact someone from the Community Development Department, and the contact information will be listed immediately following this slide. If you have any questions regarding the 2021 CDBG Capital Improvement Application, please feel free to contact Dominic Tassi, Deputy Director, Sylvia Parham, Grants Coordinator, Timothy Kleiss, Project Manager, or Lisa Carey, Administrative Analyst, at the numbers listed below. At this time, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. If you've already put them in the chat along the way, we will review those questions and try to have a response back to you momentarily. Thank you for attending this year's 2021 CDBG Capital Improvement Application webinar. Hope the information that was provided was helpful, and good luck on your 2021 CDBG application. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, Sylvia, for the presentation and walking us through the details.
CDBG.
We'd like to turn to the questions now. As was mentioned, you can raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question directly using the raise your hand Teams function. But there are a number of things in the chat, and we'll start to walk through those. First and foremost, the fact that Sylvia rocks. Let's call that out. I saw that in the chat a few times, and that is indeed true. Now, as for the questions, there was a question about how can you find out if you are in a urban renewal area, which was one of the possible ways to qualify under the Slum Blight national objective. And I think the short answer to that question is I don't think there really are any in suburban Cook. This dates back to plans that were done under the federal urban renewal and neighborhood development plan programs that were actually replaced by the CDBG program. And so it's possible there's still a plan out there with things to implement, but we're not aware of any in suburban Cook County. So it's got a category that still exists, but really isn't used, at least not in suburban Cook. There was a question around can a streetscape design planning qualify? And the answer to that question would be if it is strictly for the planning of a project, you could bring that into us under the planning call for projects, which will be part of an application released a little bit later in the year. If there's planning that you'd like to propose as part of a eventual construction of a project, I think that's if you haven't yet done the planning, it'd be a little hard for us, generally speaking, to commit to the construction before the planning's even been done. We could potentially talk about that, but I think it best would be to come in with a standalone planning project, and then construction support could follow that later on. There were some questions around the income data. I did put a couple of links in the chat, one related to the overall HUD low and moderate income data website that's specific to CDBG, and then another direct link to a mapping tool that's really easy to use. When you click, you can select down to the census tract and block group area, and when you click on them, it shows you the low mod data. So it's really easy to use in terms of finding the income data. What areas are eligible? We'd be happy to talk through using that tool, or any questions that come up with anybody that might have them. Related to the income data, there was a question about could you is there any way to fund something in a 41% census tract? I think the example was. And I mean, what I'd say to that is, generally speaking, you can combine census tracts if, you know, as Sylvia talked about, you need to demonstrate a service area or kind of benefiting area for your proposed project. So if it happened that your project would benefit 2 or 3 or how many ever, you know, census block groups, you could, you know, in practice, you might have a census tract that's 41% combined with one that's 58 and another one that's 65. And if the aggregate math puts you over 51%, you can make a case that way. So that sort of approach is possible. And again, we're happy to talk through some of those details with anybody who has questions. There's a question about, will phase 2 of a currently funded project be considered for funding? Absolutely. We love to keep good projects going that we've previously funded.
Tom, I see a question from a certain Susan Campbell about whether 2 or more municipalities could apply for Cbdg funds, just like the question for Doth earlier.
Thanks, Bennett. Thanks for flagging that. So in terms of applying for a joint project, I think that's definitely possible if that's the desire of the communities. I think it obviously would require, you know, the communities working through how that would work on their end, if they would, you know, the money would flow through a single community. Also would kind of related to the income documentation type thing we were just talking about. You'd have to, you know, demonstrate that the aggregate area would also qualify, or you know, if the kind of area income data was relevant to the project. But certainly there's the potential for collaboration, and we could figure out how the details would work. Let's see, there are a couple other questions that have come up. May additional funds be used as matching funds if needed? Absolutely. By that, I assume you mean grants, you know, other grant sources, and absolutely, that's welcome and encouraged. We'd like to try to see as much leverage as we can with our Cdbg funds. It is one of the application criteria that we look at as projects come to us. And I see one, can a capital improvement project include smaller construction rehab needs over several different properties, all within the same zip code? Certainly, that's a possibility. I think depending on the type of project, again, it might just dictate different things. Like, for example, if you're talking about some different facilities that would qualify under the low, moderate, limited clientele national objective, where it's based on the population you're serving, then certainly combining some different buildings is pretty straightforward. If you're talking about an area benefit type situation, where you might have to look at some, you know, income data from different parts of the town, if you have multiple, you know, properties, then again, it's possible, but you would just have to kind of run the income data and see what made sense. But by and large, yes, you could certainly combine some different pieces kind of under an overall project. And Sylvia, of course, chime in if there's anything else you want to add on any of these questions.
No, not at this time.
I think we may have gotten through them all in the chat.
No, there was another question, Dom. May additional grant funds be used as the matching funds?
Yes, I think I touched on that one. That
you did. Okay.
Absolutely. If I'm understanding the question right, for sure. Other grant sources can be used as a match to our program. There's not a lot of restrictions as it relates to Cdbg funds, because Cdbg funds kind of get viewed as local funds, once they come to us from the federal government. So despite it being federal funds, it's pretty flexible with what could be a match to it. And really, there isn't a match requirement under Cdbg, strictly speaking. Was that it? I felt like I saw another type of question pop up, but I'm not seeing it in the chat. So if there's any others that we missed, pop it in there again or raise your hand. But otherwise, we're approaching the 3 o'clock hour, and we can call an end to it if there's nothing else to discuss. All right, sounds like perhaps not. So with that, we'll sign off, I think. And thanks everybody for joining today. Again, you can visit our website, which we put in the chat. That has all the materials. We'll put the recording and the slides up on the website as well. And of course, you can reach out to myself and Sylvia anytime to talk through Cdbg needs. And thanks to our Department of Transportation and Highways for their partnership fund to do the joint workshop again this year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.